on that journey into the expanded states of consciousness, it's like a guided tour. You can ask questions and you get answers. And once you understand and you say, okay, I got it, the slide changes, the page is turned, and you're shown new things. In the vastness of the dark void, a certain part becomes activated. This is where action will take place. And a light describes a certain territory. He called it proto-matter. This is a matrix which will be eventually filled with matter, like the Chinese checkers, which get filled with those little marbles. And this field begins to polarize. As we saw before, the field, the ultimate field of the absolute, which the void is reconciling the opposites. So the opposites of the plus and minus are together. So they begin to separate, and it's like unscrambling scrambled eggs. And the tension is enormous because they don't really want to be separated and they want to come back together again. But this is what creates the dynamics of manifest creation, because you need the polarization in order for action to occur.
What Bentov began to understand in those expanded states was not just a symbolic vision. It was a principle that appears again and again in ancient traditions, esoteric philosophies, and also in modern physics. Polarity. As stated in the Kybalion, everything is dual, everything has two poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Bentov saw that, before manifestation, everything was unified, an absolute field, a full void, a totality without division. But for something to be able to manifest, that unity must bifurcate. The single source divides into two complementary aspects, not enemies, not contradictory, but poles of the same reality, positive and negative, light and darkness, expansion and contraction. That separation generates tension. Imagine that something that was perfectly united separates into two halves. Both still belong to the same origin, but now they are experienced as incomplete, and that incompleteness generates impulse. It is like the tension between two poles of a battery. Without a difference in potential, there is no current. It is like the bow of a violin. Without tension in the string, there is no sound. It is like personal growth. Without difficulty, there is no overcoming. Tension is not an error of the system. It is the engine of the system. Bentov understood that manifest creation is born precisely from that polarization. Separation creates dynamics. Dynamics create movement. Movement creates time, form, matter.
This center here, the black-white hole, is the consciousness that has the blueprint for this structure, and it's learning through the interaction of its parts, through all the particles that go around and get refined, and their consciousness is getting higher and higher each time around. This point grows in the process, it evolves. And what would you call a consciousness that is in charge of the universe? What is a consciousness whose body the universe is? And as Ben said, well, you would call it a creator. And so the moment you ask, again, the next picture is shown to you and explained. And what you see are more such luminous toroidal shapes appearing in the void. And as you approach, you see that they are arranged in a spiral. 7 universes per each rung of the spiral. This seems like a lot to take in at first, and you begin to count and you realize that there are 7 rungs to the spiral, which means that there are 49 universes. And on top of that structure, there appears to be a very luminous something, and as you approach it closer, this brilliant white light seems to have a shape such as this. And Ben, being familiar with the Hebrew language, looked at that and he said, no, I must be programming myself. This looks like the Hebrew letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And immediately the explanation comes. No, this is not a Hebrew letter. This is an interference pattern of four energies interacting on this level, on this cosmic level. And they create this pattern, which is a consciousness whose body this is. This consciousness contains the consciousnesses of all the 49 creators. In other words, consciousness is modular.
When Bentov saw that luminous form at the apex of the structure, his mind did something very human. It tried to interpret it through what was familiar. It reminded him of the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and he thought that perhaps he was self-suggesting. But the understanding that came to him was different. It was not a letter. It was an interference pattern. A pattern generated by the interaction of four primordial energies at that cosmic level. The form was not a cultural symbol. It was a real configuration of forces, and the coincidence with Aleph did not mean that he was projecting, but rather that those who structured that alphabet may also have accessed that same level of information. For this reason, within Jewish mystical tradition, Hebrew is considered a revealed language, not invented in the conventional sense, but discovered. In Kabbalah, it is maintained that the letters are not simple arbitrary signs, but channels or structures through which creation is articulated. From this perspective, Aleph would not be merely the first letter. It would be the geometric imprint of a primordial frequency. And that frequency, that conscious interference pattern, would be responsible for all the creation beneath it. Not as an anthropomorphic God, but as an organizing principle, a precise combination of qualities that, through interaction, generate universes. There is another detail that powerfully draws attention. 7 levels, 7 universes per level, 49 in total. This scheme resonates with other traditional maps of consciousness. In the yogic tradition, there are 7 chakras, centers that range from the densest and most material states to progressively subtler ones, culminating in the crown, where individual consciousness merges with the source. An ascent through levels of refinement. A certain connection can also be observed with the Gnostic texts discovered in Nag Hammadi. There it is narrated how Sophia, one of the aeons, emanations of the pleroma and bearer of the divine spark, descends outside the harmonious order through an impulse toward direct knowledge. From that rupture emerges Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, a consciousness ignorant of the original fullness, perceiving itself as the sole principle. From that ignorance, he creates the material cosmos and generates 7 archons, often symbolically associated with the 7 classical planets. 7 intelligences structuring a tiered cosmos, a system of spheres that organizes, and at the same time limits, the experience of embodied consciousness. Different traditions, different languages, but the same structural pattern.